Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of my 5 takeaways in the SEC. Another crazy week in college football and the SEC. Let's jump right into this real quick, guys. But before I do, can you please hit that like button? Please subscribe down below. It really helps out the channel. Thank you guys very much. Alabama invincibility gone. So when Alabama used to walk into a stadium with Nick Saban, I think there was this cloud and reverence that surrounded this team from the other team. And a lot of teams beat themselves mentally before the game even started because they thought they were an inferior football team. That no longer exists. With Nick Saban retiring, the talent being dispersed throughout college football, that is completely gone. And we saw that last night with Oklahoma. Oklahoma was not scared at all. There was no second guessing in anything they did. They thought they could line up and execute Vanderbilt's game plan and execute it at a higher level because let's be honest here, Oklahoma has better talent than Vanderbilt. And they completely did that. Jackson Arnold rushing for over 100 yards. The running game as a whole, I think, rushed for over 250 yards. So just a complete dominant performance from this Oklahoma football team. They won the game with like 60 something or 70 yards passing. Very, very impressive. And honestly, a game that shows what they can be under Brent Venables, a really good defensive team with the possibility if they can get enough offense, they can beat almost anyone in the country. Now, I think this says a lot about Alabama as well. Like I said, the invincibility is gone, but also I just don't think they are a great football team. I think they are a heavily matchup-dependent football team. And if you cannot stop Jalen Milroe running the football, they can beat you. If you can beat them. And there's very few teams, honestly, that can because you have to have a special defense to do it. That guy's basically a linebacker at the quarterback position, and he's a freak athlete, muscular as all hell. You have to be able to catch him, and then you have to be able to get him on the ground. So there's not many teams matchup-wise that can do it. Oklahoma can. They are a top 10 defense in the country. My Texas team, I think they could do it. I think Georgia, as they showed in the second half, can do it when they knew the game plan. But there's very few teams that can, and we saw LSU get run all over and teams of that nature, but no longer are teams scared of this Alabama football team as soon as they walk in the stadium or get off the bus, and that shows tremendously, guys. Number 2, I think 1 through 8 of the SEC week to week can win versus each other. I really believe that. Georgia, Alabama, Texas, LSU, A&M, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, if you want to throw them in there. I think they can compete with each other on a week-to-week basis. I think they can beat each other. We saw Vanderbilt beat Alabama. We saw them compete with LSU. We saw them compete with Texas. We saw Georgia almost, and Kentucky's not even in this group. We see Georgia struggle with Kentucky. There is no dominant team in the SEC, and that's what we're lacking. Are there still really good teams? Yes. I still think Texas, Georgia, Tennessee are still like a slight tier above the rest. But it's not by much, and it's enough to where those teams can jump up and compete and beat those other teams. Even the bad teams can jump up into that second or third, or that third tier, in my opinion, and beat like a Kentucky and Mississippi State can compete with like an Ole Miss or teams of that nature, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I just don't see a dominant team in the SEC. I don't honestly think there's a dominant team in the country. I think what people want to do is crown a dominant team for some reason. I think that's stuck in our psyche, and we have to have a dominant football team. To my eyes, there is none this year. I think there's good football teams, and I think on a quarter-to-quarter, down-to-down basis, you see dominance from certain teams. From my Texas team yesterday, I thought that first and second quarter was pretty damn dominant overall from Texas. Then you see the third quarter. It was complete crap. I see that with Ohio State. That first quarter from Ohio State versus Indiana yesterday was not good. The rest of the game, they dominate. There's no team that puts together 4 quarters of dominant football this year. It has not been done. If you want to show me a game, find it. I don't think it's been done. Even Georgia, when they played Texas, was not a dominant game. That third quarter was a bad third quarter. They almost blew that game. So overall, I don't think there's a dominant team in any conference, and I don't think there's a dominant team in the SEC. What I think has happened is the dominant teams don't exist, and I think the middle of the pack has gotten bigger, and that middle of the pack can now compete with that first-tier teams because that first-tier teams don't include an S-tier team, which is a super elite team type team. They include good teams, but there's no elite teams. That's my takeaway from that. Tennessee, win and you're in. At this point, Ole Miss, Alabama, South Carolina, I think one of those teams gets in. I personally think out of the group, Ole Miss should get in because they dominated South Carolina, whereas Alabama didn't. And honestly, I'd rather South Carolina get in at this point than Alabama. I think they're playing better. They won that game at home by 2 points. It wasn't a dominating win, whereas Ole Miss went on the road to dominate South Carolina. So if you're having to pick between those teams, they get it. Ole Miss gets in, but Tennessee has to get in. Like, Tennessee will 100% get in as long as A&M loses. If A&M loses, Tennessee is in. If they win, even if A&M wins, I still think they're in because I think Texas still gets in. I think A&M will get in at that point. A&M might get in at that point because if they lose the SEC championship game, might not. Georgia will get in. So you still have Georgia, Texas, no matter what. And then Tennessee probably will get in. So Tennessee, take care of your business versus Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, this could be your biggest. I think this would be a bigger win than Alabama. This would be upsetting a rival, keeping them from a college football playoff spot. It'd be a hell of a big win. It would put you at 7-5, which Vanderbilt hasn't done since the James Franklin era, so over a decade. So a really big game for both those teams. But I believe if Tennessee wins, they are in the college football playoff. I think the SEC only gets 4 teams. If you look around the country, I think 4 teams from the Big Ten go. I think Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, and Penn State get in unless something crazy happens. So those 4 teams are in. I think Notre Dame at this point gets in no matter what, even if they lose to USC. That's 5 teams. Then you have a group of 5 team or a Big 12 team. I honestly think the Big 12 could get left out for a group of 5 champions. So that's 6 teams. And then an ACC team, that's 7. That leaves 5 teams. I still think the ACC at this point is probably going to get 2 teams. They shouldn't, but I think they're going to. Or I could see the Big 12 getting a spot, which I'm fine with. If you want to give them one spot, that's fine. So I think that only really leaves room for one SEC team if the ACC gets 2 teams or the Big 12 gets 1 team. So overall, I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's honestly deserved. The SEC shot themselves in the foot yesterday, and they lost to bad opponents. Like, Florida is not a great football team. They're like the 10th best team in the SEC. Oklahoma is not a great football team. They're like the 11th or 12th best team in the SEC. So it's on you, SEC. You blew it yesterday, and I know SEC homers are going to fight for us. I'm not an SEC homer. I never will. I've said us will fight for the SEC. I never will fight for the SEC. I'm not going to do that. I hate the conference. I hate every conference. You know who I like? I like Texas. I could give 2 shits about the SEC as a I like covering it. That's not what I'm saying. I like covering the SEC, but I'm not rooting for the SEC as conference. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to do that. So if that offends you, that offends you. But that's where I am on that. Number 5, I nailed this. I nailed it. And I kept saying, no matter what, even when Ole Miss beat Georgia, I told you, Lane Kiffin still isn't a national championship coach. And guess what? He still isn't a national championship head coach. I've said it the whole year. Tyler and I didn't have a really big of a debate, but we disagreed on it, and I was right. This man ain't going to win a national championship. Ole Miss ain't a national championship team. Lane Kiffin is what everyone thought Steve Sarkisian was. They thought Steve Sarkisian would lose these meaningless games versus teams he should beat. He doesn't. He has not done that. In the last 2 years, Steve Sarkisian has beaten every meaningless team he should beat. Now, are the games closer than I like them to be? Yes. Lane Kiffin doesn't. Lane Kiffin loses those games consistently, guys. Consistently. You lose to a bad Kentucky team, an awful Kentucky team. A Kentucky team I saw yesterday, Texas was trying to lose the football game versus Kentucky. Tried. They were saying, here's the football game. Take it from us. And they couldn't beat Texas. And Kentucky dominated you. They had 42 minutes of time of possession. You lose that football game. Then Florida beats you. Brother, you ain't a national championship head coach. You're a nice coach. You're a top 15 head coach. You're a guy that will win 9, 10, maybe 11 games once in a while. That's who you are. So congratulations on that. That's who he is. Florida, I said it 2 months ago. I said this. Billy Napier, you should keep him because if you're going to hire Lane Kiffin, he ain't going to win the national championship you think he's going to win. You made the right decision. Billy Napier was the right decision to keep for this moment because I don't think there's a guy that's going to win a national championship right out there right now to hire. I don't, unless Urban Meyer wants to come out of retirement and go back to the Florida job, which he doesn't. That has been my 5 takeaways in the SEC. I really appreciate it, guys. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below and catch us on the Tuesday live show at 7 p.m. Eastern time for the SEC. I really appreciate it, guys.